There's a kind of anger that never makes a sound. It doesn't scream, doesn't slam doors, doesn't raise its voice. It lives quietly in the space between your ribs, a shadow that's been there so long you've learned to breathe around it. Maybe you've felt it. That strange heaviness when someone tells you how strong you are, how responsible, how mature. They say it like it's a compliment, but something inside you clenches. Because you didn't choose to be strong. You had to be. And no one ever asked what that cost you. It usually starts in childhood, doesn't it? You're 7, maybe 8, sitting at the kitchen table while the adults around you are falling apart. Maybe it's your mother crying in her room, your father's anger echoing through the hallway, or the terrifying silence of addiction filling every corner of your home. And somewhere in your small chest a decision forms. If I hold everything together, maybe we'll be okay. You don't realise it yet, but in that moment, you stop being a child. You become the emotional thermostat of the household. You learn to read the temperature of every room before you enter. You become the peacemaker, the caretaker, the one who swallows their own needs so everyone else can breathe, and the world celebrates you for it. You're so mature for your age, they say, so responsible. But no one asks about the weight you carry. No one asks about the child who disappeared beneath all that strength. Psychologists call this parentification. It's when a child is forced to take on adult emotional responsibilities long before they're developmentally ready. But it's more than just a clinical term. It's the experience of learning too young that your feelings are less important than everyone else's, that your pain is too much, that love is something you earn by being strong, not something you receive by being yourself. And here's what happens to that child's nervous system. It rewires itself around hypervigilance. Your brain learns to scan constantly for emotional danger, for shifts in mood, for the moment when someone might fall apart again. You walk on eggshells so carefully that eventually you forget what it feels like to take up space with your full weight. You become incredibly good at reading others, but you lose the ability to hear yourself. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes with this. You can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen, because the version of you that everyone knows, the strong one, the capable one, the one who never complains, that's not really you. It's the armor you built to survive. And underneath that armor is someone who's been screaming silently for years. Why didn't anyone protect me? That's the question, isn't it? The one you've never spoken out loud. Because how do you say that when everyone thinks you are fine? How do you explain that being called strong felt like being told you didn't deserve softness? And so the resentment grows, quietly, invisibly. A slow burn that you might not even recognize as anger, because it's been there since before you had words for feelings. Let me tell you what this looks like in adulthood. You might be fiercely independent, pushing help away because asking for support feels like admitting weakness. You might struggle to rest, because productivity is the only way you learn to prove your worth. You might be drawn to relationships where you're the caregiver again, repeating the only role you know how to play. But here's the cost. You never learned how to receive. You give and give and give, and then you wonder why you feel so empty. You assume that if people really knew you, really saw the messiness beneath your strength, they'd leave. So you keep performing, you keep holding it together, you keep being the rock, and deep down, part of you resents every single person who leans on you. Not because you don't love them, but because no one ever taught you that your needs matter too. There's a memory many people like this carry, a moment when you needed help and no one came. Maybe you were sick and had to take care of yourself. Maybe you were scared and had to comfort yourself. Maybe you achieved something incredible and no one noticed because they were too busy with their own crises. And in that moment, something hardened inside you. You learned that needing was dangerous, that vulnerability was weakness, that the only safe way to exist was to need nothing from anyone. Psychologists call this hyper-independence. It looks like strength from the outside, but from the inside it feels like a prison. Because you're not independent by choice, you're independent by necessity, and there's a profound difference. Here's what most people don't understand. That resentment you feel, it's not pettiness, it's not ingratitude, it's grief. Grief for the childhood you didn't get to have, grief for the softness that was never safe, grief for all the times you needed someone to hold you, and instead you had to hold everyone else. You're not angry because you're broken, you're angry because something was taken from you. Your innocence, your trust, your belief that the world was a place where children got to be children. And no one validated that loss. Instead, they praised you for surviving it. They told you to be grateful for how strong you became. But strength that's born from survival isn't a gift, it's a scar. There's a pattern that shows up in therapy when people start unpacking this. They'll talk about their childhood and minimize it immediately. It wasn't that bad, they'll say. Other people had it worse. They've spent so long protecting their parents, protecting the family narrative, that they can't let themselves feel the truth of what happened. Because if you admit how hard it was, you have to feel the anger. And anger for people who had to be strong feels terrifying. It feels like the chaos you spent your whole childhood trying to prevent. So you bury it, you rationalize it, you tell yourself you're fine. But the body remembers. The resentment lives in your jaw, your shoulders, your stomach. It shows up in the exhaustion that no amount of sleep can cure, in the anxiety that won't let you rest, in the relationships where you give everything and feel like it's never enough. Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone asked, "How are you?" and actually waited for the real answer? Not the polite one, not "I'm fine," but the truth. I'm tired of being strong. I'm tired of holding everything together. I'm tired of feeling like my needs are a burden. Most of the time, that question never comes, because people have learned to take your strength for granted. They assume you don't need support because you never ask for it. And you don't ask because you learned, a long time ago, that asking meant disappointment. So you stay silent, and the resentment grows roots. Here's where it gets complicated. Because the people you resent are often the people you love most. Your parents who were too broken to see you, your siblings who leaned on you, your partners who never learned how to carry you the way you carry them. You don't hate them, but you're exhausted by them. And that creates a terrible internal conflict. How do you hold both things at once? The love and the anger? The understanding that they were doing their best and the rage that their best wasn't good enough? This is what psychologists call ambivalence, and it's one of the most painful emotional states a human can experience. Because you can't fully grieve, and you can't fully forgive. You're just stuck in the middle, holding contradictions that don't resolve. But here's what I need you to hear. That resentment, it's not something wrong with you. It's your psyche's way of protecting something sacred. It's protecting the child who deserved better. The child who should have been allowed to be small and scared and imperfect. That anger is actually a sign of health. It means some part of you still knows you deserved more. Some part of you refuses to accept that your needs don't matter. Some part of you is still fighting for the childhood you lost. The problem isn't the resentment. The problem is that you were taught to be ashamed of it. You were taught that good people don't get angry. That strong people don't complain. That gratitude means never acknowledging what you didn't receive. So what do you do with it? How do you move forward when you're carrying years of unspoken anger? The first step isn't forgiveness. It's not gratitude. It's not positive thinking. The first step is simply this: acknowledgement. You have to let yourself see it. Really see it. The ways you were let down. The moments you needed someone and they weren't there. The times you had to be the adult when you were still a child. You have to stop minimizing it. Stop comparing it. Stop pretending it didn't hurt. Because until you validate your own experience, you'll keep waiting for someone else to do it. And that wait will last forever. No one is coming to rescue the child you were. You are the one who has to go back and say, what happened to you was not okay. You deserved better. There's a concept in psychology called reparenting. It's the process of giving yourself what you didn't receive as a child. And it starts with permission. Permission to rest without earning it. Permission to need without justifying it. Permission to be messy and imperfect and still worthy of love. For people who had to be strong, this feels impossible at first. Your nervous system is wired to believe that letting your guard down is dangerous. That softness leads to chaos. That the moment you stop holding everything together, it will all fall apart. But here's the truth. You're not 7 years old anymore. You're not responsible for everyone else's emotional regulation. You don't have to be strong all the time. And the people who truly love you, they won't leave when you finally let yourself be human. Let me tell you what healing looks like. It doesn't look like suddenly being okay with everything. It doesn't look like forgiveness that bypasses your pain. It looks like finally letting yourself feel the anger you've been swallowing for decades, and then slowly letting it soften into grief. Because underneath all that resentment is sorrow. Sorrow for the child who never got to just be. Sorrow for all the moments you had to betray yourself to keep the peace. sorrow for the love you gave and never received back, and grief when you finally let yourself feel it, is how you begin to heal, not by moving past it, but by moving through it. There's a moment in this process that's particularly painful. It's when you realize that seeking acknowledgement from the people who hurt you is a losing game. Your parents might never say, "I'm sorry I couldn't hold you." Your siblings might never understand how much you sacrificed. Your ex-partners might never see how one-sided things were. And you have to grieve that too. The fantasy that one day they'll understand. The hope that they'll finally see how much you carried. The belief that external validation will heal the wound. It won't. The only person who can heal this is you. And that's both devastating and liberating, because it means you stop waiting. You stop performing strength hoping someone will see through it. You give yourself permission to lower the mask even if no one applauds. Here's what changes when you start doing this work. You begin to notice your patterns. You catch yourself saying yes when you mean no. You recognize when you're over-functioning in a relationship. You feel the resentment rising, and instead of pushing it down, you pause. You ask yourself, what boundary did I just cross? What need am I ignoring? And slowly you start making different choices. You start letting people help you, even though it feels vulnerable. You start resting before you're completely depleted. You start saying, "I can't take that on right now," without drowning in guilt. It's uncomfortable at first. Your nervous system will tell you that you're being selfish, that you're letting people down, that something terrible will happen if you stop being strong. But nothing terrible happens. What happens instead is that you start to breathe a little easier. There's a paradox in all of this. The people who resent you for finally setting boundaries, those are usually the people who benefited most from your lack of them, and their discomfort is not your responsibility. It never was. You don't owe anyone your exhaustion. You don't owe anyone the performance of effortless strength. You don't owe anyone access to your time, energy, or emotional labor just because you used to give it freely. And the people who truly care about your well-being, they'll adjust. They might be surprised at first. They might even push back a little, but eventually they'll respect it, because real love doesn't require you to disappear in order to exist. Let me be clear about something. This process doesn't make you less loving. It doesn't make you less caring. What it does is make your care sustainable, because you can't pour from an empty cup, and you've been running on empty for years. When you finally start tending to your own needs, you don't become selfish. You become whole. And wholeness allows you to show up in relationships as your authentic self, not as the role you've been performing since childhood. That's when real connection becomes possible. Not the kind where you're the hero and everyone else is the damsel in distress, but the kind where you're both human, both vulnerable, both allowed to need and to give in equal measure. Here's something that might surprise you. The resentment you feel toward others, often there's an even deeper resentment underneath it. Resentment toward yourself, for all the times you said yes when you meant no, for all the times you silenced your own needs to keep the peace, for all the years you participated in your own erasure. And that self-directed anger is perhaps the hardest to face, because it means acknowledging that at some level you had a choice, not as a child, but as an adult, and you kept choosing the same pattern over and over, hoping it would finally earn you the love you craved. But here's the compassionate truth. You weren't choosing it because you were weak or broken. You were choosing it because it was the only survival strategy you knew. And survival strategies, even when they're no longer serving us, are incredibly hard to let go of. Forgiving yourself for that is part of the healing, not the kind of forgiveness that minimizes what happened, but the kind that says, I was doing the best I could with what I knew, and now I know better, so I can do better. You can look at your younger self, the one who said yes to everything, who swallowed every hurt, who wore the mask so perfectly that even they forgot what was underneath. And instead of shame, you can feel compassion. They were just trying to survive. They were just trying to be loved. And now you get to teach them that love isn't something you earn through suffering. It's something you receive by being yourself. Messy, imperfect, angry, sad, all of it. There's a question that often comes up in this healing process. If I stop being the strong one, who will I be? Because for so long your identity has been built around that role, the reliable one, the capable one, the one who never breaks. And letting that go can feel like losing yourself. But what you're actually losing is the armor. and underneath the armour is the person you were always meant to be, the one who laughs without restraint, the one who cries when they need to, the one who asks for help without shame, the one who rests without guilt. That person has been waiting a long time for you to come back, and they're not disappointed in you. They're relieved, because they've been so tired of holding that weight alone. Let me tell you what the other side of this looks like. You don't stop caring about people. You don't stop showing up. But the quality of your presence changes. Instead of showing up from obligation or guilt, you show up from choice. Instead of giving until you're empty, you give from overflow. And when you do need to say no, when you do need to step back, you do it cleanly, without over-explaining, without apologizing for taking up space. Because you finally internalize the truth that your needs are just as valid as everyone else's. That's not selfishness. That's self-respect. And self-respect, for people who grew up too fast, is one of the most revolutionary acts there is. There will be moments when you slip back into old patterns. Moments when you say yes too quickly, take on too much, find yourself exhausted and resentful all over again. And that's okay. Healing isn't linear, it's a spiral. You revisit the same lessons at deeper levels, over and over. What changes is your awareness. Now, when you notice the resentment building, you don't ignore it. You pause. You ask yourself what boundary you crossed, what need you ignored. You make a mental note to do differently next time, and slowly, the time between those moments gets longer. The armor becomes easier to remove, and you start to believe, really believe, that you're allowed to be soft. Here's what I want you to know. That child you were, the one who had to be strong when they should have been held, they're still inside you, and they're waiting for you to see them. Not with pity, not with shame, but with love. They're waiting for you to say, I know it wasn't fair, I know you deserved better, and I'm going to make sure that from now on we're taken care of, not by being strong all the time, but by being honest, by asking for what we need, by letting ourselves rest. That's the conversation that changes everything, when you finally stop abandoning yourself the way others abandoned you. When you finally show up for yourself the way you've been showing up for everyone else. The resentment doesn't disappear overnight, but it does transform. It softens from a hard, bitter knot into something more like sadness. And sadness, unlike resentment, can be held. It can be comforted. It can eventually release. Because sadness is the emotion that comes when we finally let ourselves grieve. When we stop pretending we're fine and admit that what happened hurt. That we lost something we can never get back. That we deserved better and didn't receive it. And in that grief, paradoxically, there's healing. Because grief is love with nowhere to go. And when you let yourself feel it, you're finally loving yourself the way you needed to be loved all along. There's a strange kind of freedom that comes when you stop trying to be strong all the time. You realize that your worth was never tied to your ability to carry everyone else's pain, that you were lovable before you learned to be useful, that your existence, just your presence, was always enough. And when you internalize that, really internalize it, the resentment loses its power, because you're no longer waiting for someone to give you permission to matter. You've given yourself that permission, and no one can take it away. That's when you stop being the person who had to be strong, and you become the person who chose to be whole. Let me leave you with this. If you recognize yourself in these words, if you've spent your life being the strong one and feeling resentful for it, please know this: your anger is valid. Your exhaustion is real. Your need for rest is not a weakness. You were a child who deserved to be protected, and you weren't. You were a person who deserved to be seen, and you were overlooked. You were a soul who deserved to be soft, and you had to be steel, and none of that was your fault. The healing begins when you stop waiting for someone to acknowledge what you lost. When you stop hoping your strength will finally earn you the care you've always craved. When you turn toward yourself with the tenderness you've been offering everyone else and say, you've carried enough. You can put it down now. Because you don't have to hold the world together anymore. You never did. That was never your job. Your job is simply to be human, to feel what you feel, to need what you need, to rest when you're tired. And if the people around you can't handle that, then they were never your people. Your people will meet you in your softness. They'll hold space for your anger and your grief and your exhaustion. They'll love you not for what you do, but for who you are. The resentment you've been carrying all these years, it's been protecting something precious, the part of you that still believes you deserved better, the part that refuses to accept that your needs don't matter, the part that's been waiting, patient and persistent, for you to finally come home to yourself. And when you do, when you finally lay down the weight you've been carrying and let yourself be held, something remarkable happens. The resentment doesn't turn into bitterness. It transforms into wisdom, into compassion, into a fierce, protective love for anyone else who had to be strong too soon. Because you know what it costs, and you refuse to let anyone else pay that price alone. So if you're reading this, and your chest feels tight, if tears are rising that you've been holding back for years, if you're finally admitting how tired you are of being strong, then this is for you. You don't have to carry it anymore. You don't have to prove your worth through suffering. You don't have to earn love by being invincible. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to grieve the childhood you didn't get and the care you deserved. You're allowed to say, "This is too heavy and I need help." And when you do, you're not weak. You're finally, beautifully, courageously human. The child inside you who had to be strong. They're not disappointed in you. They're proud of you for surviving, for carrying on, for making it this far, and they're ready now. Ready for you to stop performing and start healing. Ready for you to stop hiding and start feeling. Ready for you to finally, after all these years, put down the armor and pick up your life. Because you were never meant to be strong all the time. You were meant to be whole. And wholeness includes the soft parts, the scared parts, the parts that need to be held. Those parts aren't weaknesses, they're what make you human. And being human, in all its messy, vulnerable, imperfect glory, is exactly what you were always supposed to be. The resentment will soften when you stop betraying yourself, when you stop saying yes to things that drain you, when you stop performing strength and start practicing honesty. When you let yourself need without shame, it won't happen all at once. It will happen in small moments. The first time you say no without over-explaining. The first time you ask for help and actually let yourself receive it. The first time you cry in front of someone and don't apologize for it. Each of these moments is a small revolution, a quiet rebellion against everything you were taught about strength and worth and love, and each one brings you closer to the truth. You were always enough. You just forgot for a while. So here's my invitation to you. The next time someone calls you strong, don't just smile and accept it. Pause, check in with yourself, and if what you really need is to hear, "You've been carrying a lot, how can I help?" then say that, out loud, without apology. Because the world doesn't need more people who are strong at the expense of their own well-being. It needs people who are whole, people who know how to give and receive, people who understand that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the bridge to real connection. And maybe that's the final gift of all this pain, that it taught you what real strength is. Not the ability to carry everything alone, but the courage to finally put it down. The hidden resentment of the child who always had to be strong doesn't have to define you forever. It can be the teacher that shows you where your boundaries need to be, the compass that points you toward what you truly need, the fire that burns away everything that isn't authentically you. And when you let it transform you instead of consuming you, something beautiful emerges. Not the false strength of armor, but the real strength of presence, the strength to be yourself, fully and unapologetically, in a world that tried to make you small. That's the strength worth having. That's the strength worth celebrating. And that's the strength that finally sets you free. You've been strong for so long, too long. And it's okay now. It's okay to be tired. It's okay to need. It's okay to feel all the anger and grief and exhaustion that you've been holding back. Because on the other side of that honesty is peace. Not the forced peace of pretending everything's fine, but the real peace of finally telling the truth. To yourself, to others, to the child inside you who's been waiting decades to be seen. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of truth. The willingness to feel everything you've been avoiding. The courage to be soft in a world that praised you for being hard. The child who had to be strong is still inside you, but they don't have to carry the weight anymore. You can tell them it's safe now. Safe to rest. Safe to need. Safe to be small. And when you do, when you finally give that child the tenderness they deserved all along, the resentment will begin to fade. Not because you've forgotten what happened, but because you finally, after all this time, come home to yourself. And being home, truly home, in your own heart, That's the only strength you ever really needed.